I'd like to start by introducing the top table. Mel Guzner is on the extreme left-hand side of this table, right-hand side as seen from the floor. Mel is in charge of the Professional Activities Committee, a very active committee this year, a very important one for the club. Next to me is Nobuko Hara. Nobuko-san is the secretary of the club. She takes minutes at our meetings, a very crucial person. Ushio Shota is at the extreme end on this side. He's a director of the club, and next to him is Bob Neff, a man of great experience on many boards. Next to him is Muramatsu-san, who I believe first met Tanaka-san, the father, in 1961 in the White House, if I've got this correct. One has to know the genealogy to appreciate Muramatsu-san's long connection with the family. Now I come to our guest of honor today, Tanaka Makiko-san. I, like many of you, will have seen, like many of you, saw her on television the night of the elections and was immediately impressed by the existence of a new personality in Japanese politics. There was something about the way the camera focused on you. There was something about the very forthright way in which you spoke to your constituents, your supporters. There was something different. There was a sense that you had accepted political office for the first time, you'd been elected to public office for the first time, and that you were a new force in politics. If I have this correctly, you stood as an independent, but subsequently transferred to the LDP. The LDP is by far the largest party in the Japanese parliament today. We have to take it extremely seriously. A few biographical notes. MS Tanaka went to a Quaker school in the United States in the early 60s. She spent 1 year there. She speaks excellent English, better than my Japanese. And she's familiar with the United States to a degree that very few Japanese politicians are today. Moving on from there, she played no part, as I've already alluded to this fact, she played no part in Japanese politics up until now. She was always a very important person next to her father. And after his sudden illness, she emerged as a key figure in Meijiro. I'm not going to remain standing any further. The person you've come to hear is Ms. Tanaka, and please put the rostrum in place, Pachi-san.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Scott Stokes. This is a great honor for me to be here. Well, I'd like to introduce myself a bit. My name is Makiko Tanaka, a rookie member of the House of the Representatives from Niigata Prefecture. And up until 42 days ago, I was a housewife. Yes, that's true. And I live with my husband, 3 children, both my parents, and a big white dog. To tell you the truth, I hesitated a bit before accepting your invitation to this luncheon. There are 2 reasons for my hesitation. The first is quite historical. When the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan invited my father to speak here in 1974, he was the Prime Minister. The grilling you gave him set off a chain of events. But fortunately, I am immune, so I can stand before you with complete peace of mind. And the second reason for my hesitation is dental. Here. Problems with my teeth have made it hard for me to pronounce words correctly. I mean the words with TH sounds like thank you very much or earthquake and things like that. But despite my misgiving, I'm here. Now, I'm sure that most of you want to hear about my new career. When I decided to run for office, the Japanese press asked me again and again, "Why did you decide to run for a seat in the Diet so suddenly after it was dissolved?" And it is true that my campaign was only 26 days long, but the results were astounding. I got 93,319 votes. That's 19.94% of the voters in that district. My decision to become a candidate matured slowly, in the same way that wine is born from grape juice after a long dormant period. From the time I was old enough to understand what was going on around me, I've been neck-deep in politics. Being both raised in a politician's family and married to a politician whose career spans more than a decade. Politics to me is like water is to a fish or air to a bird. It's my daily habitat and my life. So I guess my decision to run could be described as inevitable. It was like an enormous, uncontrollable force surging up from somewhere deep inside me. It must be like this when people hear God speak to them. It was an irresistible force, unlike anything I have ever before experienced in my life. My campaign slogans were, "Authority and tender loving care should go together in government. Be sensitive to people's inner concerns, and give the weak their place in the sun." By authority, here I mean something like fatherhood, and by tender, loving care, I mean mothering. I honestly believe that politics should be modeled on the family. As you all know, post-war Japan has come a long way economically. But I've always felt that government programs have never addressed our more spiritual needs as human beings. Today, we Japanese are well off materially, but the task of the cultivating our minds and souls has been left on the back burner. Our society now rests on some pretty solid foundations when it comes to infrastructure and things material. But when it comes to things intangible, I believe we were lagging behind. To be specific, welfare for the elderly and the disabled needs improvement, but has never received much attention. As I am sure you know, Japan's birth and mortality rates have dropped very rapidly in the past few decades. Rapid economic growth in part, and the accompanying advances in medicine, increased nutrition, and progress in our cultural life deserve the credit for this. But Japan's social welfare problems are becoming increasingly serious as a result. Along with the haves, there are the have-nots. Some Japanese have found their place in the sun, while others have been left out. Obviously, it's important for the elderly and the disabled to find meaning in their lives. But we, the generation that is now at the pinnacle of its career, we too have reached the stage where our human rights and dignity ought to be better protected, so that we can become more productive and can in turn be of greater help to those citizens who need help. That is why we have to work quickly to build a society where the weak and the strong, physically and socially, can live together in productive harmony. Another issue I am concerned about is education. Post-war Japanese education has been characterized by heavy emphasis on the 3 R's. Japan now has very high educational achievement standards, but we haven't done enough to teach youngsters about respect for others, the importance of spiritual values and other intangible things. In both education and social welfare, it's important for systems and educational institutions to foster human rights and cultivate a greater respect for and appreciation of the dignity of the individual human being. People all over the world realize that people are a nation's greatest asset. I decided to run for public office myself because I knew of no political party or political figure who stood specifically for my ideals. In today's Japan, politicians' statements are mostly strings of empty words, and after the long talk, nothing gets done. Ordinary people fail to see how the political decision-making process functions. Many of you no doubt feel sometimes that it is impossible to fathom the Japanese decision-making process. What motivates these decisions, and who takes responsibility for them, even when you are aware of the outcome and consequences of the decisions? The average Japanese feel the same way, I believe. What we honestly need is forceful leader and clear policy planning for a long-term perspective, and we need action. By the way, I would like to take advantage of my presence here today to find out what you representatives from the world press think about the newborn Hosokawa coalition government. The main issue in the last election and the avowed mission of the Hosokawa cabinet is political reform. But in my campaign, I focused on issues that are closer to people's daily lives. Issues like revision of the sales tax, passing on the benefits of the strong yen to consumers, taking a new look at foreign aid, and the pros and cons of liberalizing rice imports, and issues on workers from abroad. And I think that reform of the electoral process should not be entrusted to Diet members because they have a vested interest in the outcome. It should fall instead to an impartial third party who should be allowed to take all the time necessary to study the question thoroughly. While politicians are spending all their times on this, more important national interests are not getting the attention they deserve. Japan will and must suffer a result. And I am very aware and worried about this. On August the 10th, the day after the Hosokawa cabinet was inaugurated, I called on the Minister for Public Health and Welfare, Mr. Ouchi, and also the Minister of Education, Ms. Akamatsu, to congratulate them and also to tell them what I thought needed doing. Both ministers were so surprised that I was on the go so soon, and both told me I had inherited my father's drive and impatience that I don't agree with, though. In response, I told them that I believe that actions are more eloquent than words. I look forward to seeing them exercise inspired and inspiring leadership. Well, you know, the very instant I decided to run, the stiffness in my shoulders and neck that had plagued me for years suddenly disappeared, as if by a miracle. It has been a totally new discovery for me to realize how challenging every day in the politician's life can be, and also how calm and self-possessed I can remain in the eye of the storm. I know all the cruel aspects of the politics only too well from my individual experiences. But I think I've now discovered the other side too. To be a politician or a statesman, whichever you want to call, it is a hard work, I know. but this is worth trying and also worth living. That's the way I feel at the present moment. From now on, I intend to work through politics to transcend the difference between political systems, cultures, religions, and languages, working with people from all over the world, my fellow inhabitants here on this earth, on the basis of mutual respect for each other and coexistence as human beings, the noblest of all creatures, in order to achieve world peace and improve humanity's well-being. And I would like to introduce a little bit about my husband. He used to be the parliamentary vice minister for foreign affairs under the Kaifu administration. And I feel it's so happy that my husband shares the same kind of thoughts and idea with me on this point. So here I am at your luncheon, and I would like to take advantage of this opportunity, not only to make your acquaintance, but to make friends with you at the same time. And I ask for and want your advice. I just became the vice chairman of International Affairs Bureau of LDP. So I might be able to see some of you in some other occasions soon. Well, if you have any questions, I'll be delighted to answer them. But you should know that I am a Yamato Nadeshiko. You know that meaning? Well, typically demure, retiring, and shy Japanese lady. And yes, I mean it. And because I'm not a good talker also, I want to avoid any misunderstandings. I have asked Mr. Muramatsu here, Japan's most distinguished Japanese English interpreter and also a member of this club, to interpret for me. And we first met in way back 1960s in Washington. And I'm sure he'll be able to read between the lines, even without reading my lips, and make what's on my mind crystal clear to you. Well, thank you very much for this wonderful occasion, and thank you to Mr. Scott. Muchas gracias por todo. Thank you.
I'd like to call for questions from the working press. Please identify yourselves, give your affiliation. Thank you. Wolf?
Hi. Wolf Küster, Der Spiegel, Germany. I had the honor and privilege 19 years ago to be at the grilling of your father here at this club. So my first question is, in what respect and to what degree do you think your father has been a political role model for you? And secondly, do you think you would have stood a chance to be elected for office if it were not in Niigata?
Do you mind if I answer you here, or do you want me to stand up and answer? ありがとうございます。
Thank you.
このままで聞こえますか？最初の質問につきましては、その父の影響というふうなことでございますが、父は大変政治家として厳しい試練を受けてきた人間であるというふうに理解をしております。
First question about the influence of my father on me. I believe as a politician, he went through various severe trials and tribulations.
ですが、戦後の政治家の中で父がかなりいろいろと実績を積むことが全てではありませんが、かなりの部分、志を達することができたのは、父に政治家としての哲学とビジョンがあったからであると思います。そしてもちろんいい仲間がいたこともあります。
However, in the post-war years, he was able to accomplish not everything he had hoped to, but considerable amount of what he wanted. He left tremendous records. He was able to do so because I believe he had firm conviction, political belief, vision, and of course, his friends or comrades.
ですから私は父のそういう姿を子供の時から見ておりますので、父の哲学、行動、責任の取り方を尊敬しております。
I grew up as a child watching my father as a politician, and I have grown to respect him for his philosophy, for his action and for the way he takes and took responsibilities.
2つ目の質問なんです。
2つ目の質問は、新潟以外でも当然できたと思いますか。
あ、そう思いません。
Second question, I don't think I could have won outside of Niigata.
その答えを期待しておられたでしょう。
I'm sure you expected that answer.
はい。それはそうです。
Next question.
Yeah, Haruko Watanabe, Press Foundation Asia. When you passing in and you look at the tableaus on the wall and you pointed out your father and said, this is the victim of the press.
はい。
Since your campaign statement and until now, how do you comment on the coverage of the press? And the second question is, there are 300,000 illegal foreigners working in Japan. As the vice chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, what is your policy?
最初の質問は壁のあるお父様の写真を見て報道の犠牲者だとおっしゃいましたが、当選されてから今日までの報道が田中さんを扱った報道部についてどうお考えになりますか。第2に、国際委員会副委員長として、外国の非合法に日本に入っている労働者についてどういうふうにお考えになっていますか。
一つ目の質問にお答え申し上げます。それは私は大変マスコミの力がなければ、26日間でこんなに早く地元に自分の政策が浸透、アピールできなかったと思っておりますので、私は大変プレスの皆様に感謝申し上げております。
I'll answer the first question first. It was thanks to the power of the mass media that I was able to win my office with only 26 days of campaign. Thanks to the mass media, the way the press reported my campaign, I was able to reach out to the voters, and my view had become thoroughly familiar to all these people. And in that sense, I am appreciative of the press.
それから2点目でございますけれども、外国人労働者の問題ですが、私は日本は長いことこの鎖国状態のような状態で、生産物は工業製品特に輸出をしていながらですね、貿易摩擦等もありますが、人間的な交流というのは大変下手であったと思うんです。島国ということもあります。で、政治家も国民の意識もですね、非常にそれに対応していっていないという認識を持っておりました。
About the second question about illegal foreign workers, Japan has been under a long sort of self-imposed isolation in a way. While we have been exporting our products, particularly industrial manufacturers, causing trade frictions every now and then, we have been very poor at human communication, communicating with people abroad in human terms, and partly because we are an island nation. And the politicians, as well as people, have never been up to the reality about international communication.
そして高度なですね、技術を、その外国から来られる労働者は2種類あると思います。片っぽは高度なテクノロジーとか、それから医学的なものをですね、学ぼうと思った、あるいは農業技術の習得のために来られる方と、一方は単純労働のために来られる方と、2種類あると思います。で、そのことに単純労働の方、今おっしゃってると思いますが、この場合、日本は期限をはっきり決めていなくて、まだ対応ができていないんですけども、期限を決めるべきです。例えば5年間というふうなことで、そしてそのウェイジの面でもはっきりしておりませんからですね、日本人と同じような相当の額をきちっとお払いするというようなことを労働省が決めてですね、差し上げるべきだと思います。特に期限を決めるべきです。滞在期限を。そして終わったら国元に帰られると必ず。
There are two kinds of foreign people in Japan. One is the type of people who come to seek to study, to improve their skills, techniques, or to study medicine, for example, or to study agricultural science, and so on. On the other hand, there are more simple manual type of workers. This is the second category, which I think is what you are referring to. I believe we ought to set a certain period of time within which these people should be allowed. There has been no such system. For example, say, just as an example, 5 years. upon completion of which these workers are to return to their home. And while here, legally, they ought to be paid wages commensurate with similar Japanese workers. That should be all taken care of by the Ministry of Labor. And I believe the decision should be made about particularly the length of stay in which they are allowed to come and work here.
ワシントンポストの投稿ですが、To become the top leader of Japanese politics, I mean, Prime Minister, what kind of quality and training do you think it is necessary? And what kind of training do you think necessary for you to become the Japanese Prime Minister? Let's say in 10 years.
That's what I'm not looking for it.
総理になる資質、経験、どんなものが必要か、特にあなたご自身が総理になるためにはどんな経験をこれから積んでいかないと考えています。
Training. 最初の方は難しい。最後の質問には簡単です。答えはそんなことはありえないことですから。
First, the difficult question. Second, is simple. It can never happen.
そうですね。やっぱりこういう会合にしょっちゅう呼ばれてですね、鍛えられることじゃないでしょうか。シニアの質問を受けて、もっともっと数時間前に
I think I need to be invited more open to forums like this, to be grilled and to be thus trained.
若いうちから。
While still young.
それ今に関連して、ちょっと待って、ごめんなさい。今に関連して、一番思うことですけども、選挙戦を通じて思いましたが、日本の政治家は現場を意外と見ていません。選挙でもって票をもらうために動き回っているんですが、実際の現場の人々の声、政治の答えはですね、有権者の生活者の中にあるんですよ。それをどうやってフィードバックするか、世界の皆さんがこうやっていらっしゃる中でどうやってその声をフィードバックしていくかと、みんなのために配分していくかと、財政を。だからそうシンプルに捉えればいいんですけども、ちょっとなんか特殊になってしまっているので、そういう生の声が聞こえないから、もっともっと外に出て行って、バッジを外して、実際の声を聞くことだと思います。この方がいい考えでしたね。
Well,
思いつきました。
during the election, I walked a lot visiting voters in my constituency and saw the people, the way they lived and the way they worked. A lot of politicians simply look for votes and they don't try to observe with their own eyes what the voters are doing or what they have in mind. In other words, most politicians don't listen to the voice from the fields. We must feed back their voices, their views, their aspirations back to them by giving better distribution of assets or budget or whatever. Do that, they should also reach out to the press and then through the press to the world. They tend to be very narrow-minded. They don't listen to the real voice of the people out in the country. I believe we Diet members should get out of our places and go and meet the people, removing our Diet members' lapel pins or badges. And I think that's the way I should have answered the question first.
そして答えはそこにあるんです。有権者の中に答えがある。人間の中に。
Because the answers are always found there among the voters, in the voice of the living voters.
すみません、お待たせしました。
Sorry, thank you very much.
I'm lawyer Jane Bailon from the Philippines News Time Daily. The reason I cover this luncheon is I'm trying to approach my story on the issue of being a dutiful daughter. When I was young, when I was training as a reporter in the Philippines, we were so impressed when your father came and you were the one taking care of him. At the time, the Filipinos thought that Japanese women are very servile and they don't know how to move in the front line. And then when we saw you, we all agreed that you were really. I am not sure if it's Yamato Dashiko, but you represent the kind of women that would make a good advisor to a famous politician. So that's a comment on the side. My question really is, the new cabinet has already, Mr. Hozawa himself said that the war in Asia was a war of aggression and something must be done about it. And you mentioned that you have met with the Minister of Education to discuss a few things. I was wondering, do you think that the Japanese textbooks should now be changed so that it will incorporate the new line of action of the new government, and do you think that Japan should really move towards giving compensation to women who claim themselves as victims of the so-called comfort women?
私が今日ここへ取材に参った理由は、非常に、あなたがお父親に対して、親孝行な娘さんであるというところにまず最初は興味を持ったわけです。フィリピンで私がジャーナリストとの勉強をしている間に得た印象は、お父親が来られたときに、非常にお父様の中によく尽くされた娘さんだという印象を持ちました。日本の女性というのは非常に隷属史的で、ほとんど正面に出てこないと思っていた私にとってはそれは驚きでありまして、果たしておっしゃるように、大和なでしこという意味が私にはよくわかりませんけれども、本当に有力な政治家の良きアドバイザーであるということなのかもしれません。以上は私の感想でありますが、質問させていただきたいことは、細川新政権になってから、すでに細川首相が言っておられますけれども、アジアでの戦争は侵略の戦争であったと。そういうことをはっきり言っておられます。また先ほど、文部大臣にもお会いになったということも伺いました。さて、伺いたいのは、日本の教科書は、このような新しい政権の考え方、行動を盛り込むべく変更されるべきだとお考えになりますか。また日本は、いわゆる慰安婦と呼ばれる犠牲になった女性たちに保障すべきだとお考えになりますか。
まず最初のフィリピンに父が参りましたとき、私も同行いたしましたので、多分今質問なした、ミスなんとおっしゃいましたか、名前は。
So I didn't get your name.
もしかしたらマニラでお会いしたかもしれないなと思いますが、私はあの時にとても強い印象を受けました。その一つはですね、マルコス夫人が、当時は妹マルコさんの元気なところでしたから、マラカニアンパレスでですね、たくさん服を持っておられたんです。1日3回ぐらい取り替えて、アンブレラと全部同じ。黄色いプロのあれやったら、傘もみんな黄色。白い時は全部白でですね、すごいと思って、世界中のマレーシアの王妃様よりも、エリザベス女王よりも、私がお会いしたオランダのユリアナ女王ですか、よりもすごいなという感じをしたのが一つ。それから、I didn't look at the shoes. I was just astonished with the amount of the dress anyway. それから、
First question, to answer the first question, yes, I did accompany my father when he visited the Philippines. And we may have met you actually, and I have very strong impressions. One, we visited, of course, the Malacanang Palace, and when I met Mrs. Imelda Marcos, she was in better health at that time. I was surprised at the magnitude of the size of her wardrobe. She changed her dresses about 3 times a day. With them, she changed her parasols and the pearls of different colors. If she wore a white dress, the pearls were white and parasols were white. And I was dumbfounded. She was far more garishly dressed than the emir, the Malaysian, not the queen, the sultan's dowager of Malaysia, or Queen Elizabeth, or Queen Juliana of the Netherlands, the people I had met. And I was simply dumbfounded. Did I see her shoes? I didn't look down enough to observe her shoes.
でも私はその他にまずお国のことで印象深かったことですけれども、外出禁止令が当時引かれておりました。にもかかわらず、夜遅くまで大統領の賓客っていうのは大変プライベートな賓客なのに、たくさん遅くまで来て、いつまでもお酒を飲んでられて、一般の国民はどうなってるかと思って私は少し頭に来たものですから、翌朝、マルコス夫人に、ぜひトンド地区に行って見せていただきたいと言ったら、トンドという貧しい方たちのエリアがありました。そのトンド、そのところは聞いたことがないとおっしゃったのが大変印象的でした。
I was also impressed by another incident. There was a fellow prohibition about going out after certain hours in the evening onto the streets. And we were, yes, guest of honor, very much private guest of honor, but people who were around us were drinking and making merriments until the wee hours at night. And I was wondering what the people on the streets were doing. Were they drinking and enjoying themselves just as much? I asked Mrs. Marcos about the people, and she I
トンドディストリクトというのが、いや、私は、はいはい、マニラに。
And I asked her, why wouldn't you like to come and see the people in the Tondo district, the very poor district? She said she had never heard of it.
でも私はもう一つフィリピンで大変感銘を受けたことは、たくさんの女性の記者の方がとても鋭いいい質問をなさったので、この国はきっとすごく成長するだろうと、人的資源があるなと思いました。今日その代表があられること大変嬉しく思います。
Another thing that impressed me tremendously in the Philippines was a great number of journalists who were female. These women journalists in the Philippines asked very sharp and intelligent questions, and I'm sure they are great human assets to make your country more successful than ever. And I'm pleased to see a fine example of that the journalist sport today.
そしてメインクエスチョンにお答えしますが、手短に申し上げますが、教科書検定問題、これは私はもう国が、役人が日本の歴史をカバーしたりごまかしたりする時代ではないと思っています。過去の事実をきちっと正しく、世界の方も、そのポイントオブビューは違うでしょうけれども、やはりかなり正確にですね、日本の責任も含めて知らしめるべきですから、多分そういうことをおっしゃってるんでしょう。教科書の検定というものは役人がやるものではないと思っています。それから韓国の慰安婦の問題、その他中国でも、フィリピンでもインドネシアでもあります。こういう問題についても、私はそれぞれの国、例えば韓国の場合がはっきりしておりますけれども、1900何年でございましたかね、韓国の国交ができたときに、もう一応賠償ということで済んでいるんですね。ですから、この個別の問題についてはですね、それは政府が決定すべき問題ですけれども、なかなかはっきり、これをやったら次はということがエンドレスだと思うんです。極めて。で、一つ私が感銘を受けたことは、韓国の新しい外務大臣が、いつまでも韓国側がこういうことばかりを言っていると、韓国の国際的な地位が上がらないというような発言、少し正確でないかもしれません。おっしゃってました。それは私が責任を逃げる、日本人として責任を逃げるのではなくて、相手の方もそのぐらいの意識になってもらわないと、ミューチュアルアンダースタンディングというものはなかなかできないのではないかと思います。ですから、かつての日本の政府でもってお答えしたことでもって、私はある程度とどめないと、戦争責任はいつまでもいつまでも言っていたら終わらなくなってしまうと。
I will answer the serious part of your question shortly about the school textbooks. No longer do we live in an age where a government or bureaucrats should check textbooks, or cover the textbooks, cover up the past, or misrepresent the past. We should look at the facts straightforward, although the facts may be viewed in several different ways, I realize, but we should spell out the facts as accurately as possible, admitting our responsibilities where doing so is due, and these things should not be left to the bureaucrats. In other words, there should not be textbook inspection or screening by the bureaucrats. About the so-called comfort women, Korea, China, the Philippines, Indonesia, and so on. I think the case of Korea is relatively clearer. When was that? When the peace treaty after the war was concluded, technically and legally it was taken care of. But when it comes to the individual cases, government would have to look at these cases. But the next step is, if you make certain compensations, that will mean there will be more cases that ought to be compensated and more demands. I was very impressed recently by the Korean Minister of Foreign Affairs, who said, and I'm not quoting exactly because I don't remember the exact phrase he used, but he said to the effect that Korea alone should not be pursuing such a thing. And to do so, to continue to do so for Korea, would mean that Korea's international position or status or stance would never get any better. I'm not quoting him to evade any responsibility on the part of the Japanese people, but I think it takes two to tango. I think there should be reciprocal understanding on the other party, and we should have better meeting of minds.
Harvey Stockwin, South China Morning Post and Times of India. When your father ran for the prime ministership in 1972, he produced a book remodeling the Japanese archipelago. Now, a protege of your father, one Ichiro Ozawa, has produced a book which I understand is a very similar title in the Japanese kanji characters. What I'm driving at is, when you decided to join a political party after your election in Niigata, did you ever consider joining Shinseito? Or what were the actual reasons for you joining the LDP? Forgive me, was it filial piety?
お父様が総理に出られたときに日本列島改ざんをお書きになりましたが、田中総理の、弟子のような大変世話になった小沢一郎さんが最近似たような題の趣旨の本を出されました。そこで伺いたいのは、選挙に当選されてから自民党に入られたわけですけれども、その前に新政党に入ろうということは、お考えとしてはちょっとは心をよぎりましたです。また、自民党に入ったというのは、いわば親孝行で入ったというふうに考えてよろしいでしょうか。お父様への愛情です。
お答えします。親孝行で入ったわけではございません。
Not the filial piety. To answer this second question.
基本的にはですね、私は選挙前の段階では、自由民主党に入ろうとして手続きをいたしましたが、新しい新政党が出来上がって、党が半分に割れていたためにですね、そういうことに対する対応が自由民主党の事務局ができなかったんです。で、私は一回アプライしたけど返事がなかったので、こういう変化に対して何も対応できない自由民主党だから問題が起こると思いましたので、私はそのアプライを取り下げて、そして無所属で立候補いたしました。その結果、連立政権と自民党2つになりましたが、両方に問題があります。自由民主党には派閥という問題があります。これはかつての吉田鳩山、あるいは田中、福田の時代のように、政策でもって外交も内政問題、財政も違うならいいですけども、今の派閥というのは、お金とポスト、どうやって出世するか。そのことだけですから意味がない。ところが、それは大変硬い殻になっていて、破るのは難しいです。一方、連立側も問題があります。それは政策綱領が全部違うんです。例えば、社会党の自衛隊派遣の問題にしても、憲法改正の問題にしても、あるいは原発の問題にいたしましても、全部政策綱領が違います。そういう人たちが一緒になって、反自民党でなければいいと言って一緒にはなりましたけれど、自民党のお金の汚い問題が問われたんです。国民から。汚くなければいいと言った新政党にも汚い人いっぱいいるんです。自民党にもまだまだ残って済ましてこうやって言います。多分みんなスキューバダイビングやってるいつもでもやってるのかもしれませんけれども、そんないつまでも潜ってられませんから、ガス欠になりますから、酸素か青オクシジェンが足りなくなる。いつかそのうちブローアップするとまた閉まってますけど。ですから、こちらは政策綱領がないから、反自民はいい。けど何するかと言ったら、もう早速喧嘩が始まるってことは頭でわかります。自民党も派閥の問題。どちらも問題がある。ところが、そこまではできます。
はい。
I talk too much.
Basically, before the election, I had already filed an application for the LDP membership. But then there came the split with the Shinseito. And the LDP secretariat could not cope with that happening. I applied for the LDP membership, but they could not even send me a reply to it because they were so shocked by the split and disorganized. And that is why I run basically as an independent. There are problems. LDP has the faction problems. Coalitions have their problems. In the good old days of the prime ministers like Yoshida, Hatoyama, Tanaka, and Fukuda, the factions were divided according to their policy orientations, legitimate differences. Now there are factions for the purpose of getting money and getting posts, buying posts, and how to go up in your political ladders. And there's no meaning in those factions. And on the part of the coalitions, their platforms are so multifarious. For example, take the Social Democratic Party, Shakaito alone. They have different, completely different platforms about self-defense forces and constitution, nuclear power generation, with other elements of the coalition. Only one thing they have in common is that they are anti-LDP. And they say they are anti-LDP, and LDP has money problems, scandals, and new Shinseito also has dirty, so filthy elements in them, scandal-ridden problems too. So does, of course, the LDP. But even those people in LDP are going underground or hiding themselves under the water. They're probably doing scuba diving, but you can't keep doing scuba diving all the time for a long time because they'll run out of oxygen. They'll either come up soon or except that they are anti-LDP. Soon those coalition elements are going to fight with each other, while the LDP